All right, good evening, everyone. If you have just stumbled in off the street or encountered us on Charter Channel 180 or at accgov.com or on YouTube, you find yourself either live or via video in Athens-Clarke County City Hall. And it is Tuesday, September 17th. This evening, we have a brief special called session and then our regularly scheduled agenda setting session. And there'll be several opportunities for public input that I'll describe in a few moments. But given that we have a special called session, I'm going to ask Clerk Spratland to call the roll.
Davenport. Parker.
Here.
Link. Here. Wright.
Present.
Denson.
Here.
Naismith.
Present.
Edwards.
Here.
Harrod.
Present.
Thornton.
Here.
Hamby.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I appreciate it. We have a single item on our special called session agenda to consider under suspension of rules. We take public input on this component of the agenda as well. So if there's any member of the public who would like to come to speak,
Sir, do we need to move for suspension of the rules?
we will, and we can certainly do that at this point.
All right, I'd like to move for suspension of the rules.
Second.
All right, have a motion from Commissioner Naismith, a second from Commissioner Harrod for suspension of rules. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, and any member of the public who would like to come speak on this single item on our special called session agenda, you have 3 minutes to speak. The light in front of Clerk Spratland will turn green when you begin speaking. It will turn yellow when you have 30 seconds remaining, and red when your 3 minutes has come to a close. Would anyone like to speak to this item? All right, seeing no one, we will come behind the rail. Any commissioner interested in discussion or a motion? Commissioner Wright?
Yeah, me. I make a motion that we approve options 1A, B, C.
Second.
All right, motion from Commissioner Wright, second from Commissioner Harrod, comment from Commissioner Denson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a couple of questions, and maybe the manager's office can answer this for me. How many Athens-Clarke County PD officers do we have assigned to this task force?
Commissioner, I'd have to go back and look. It's somewhere between 4 and 8, I
Okay.
think. I'm trying to remember.
Okay,
And then the other counties have some folks too.
right. I guess my biggest, and I'm fine moving ahead with it since it's a reimbursement. I guess I would be fine doing that. But I would like to have us look into this a little bit. Recently, Atlanta pulled all of their officers from all federal task force after they requested that the federal government allow them to put badge cams on their officers in these task force, and that request was denied. And a result of Atlanta pulled all of their officers from all task force, which to me is concerning that that's not being allowed. So I guess I would like us to make a similar request that our officers, along with all officers on these task force, do wear badge cams, as is what we require of our own officers here in Athens-Clarke County. And so I think that's consistent, and I think it's actually healthy for the residents of Athens-Clarke County, along with the entire state of Georgia.
Commissioner Park?
Yeah, I had some other questions regarding this agenda item. Can we get some information about the investigation initiative SISE 00517? I'm just wondering what these expenditures were used in service of for this particular investigation.
Okay. Is that in the agenda item?
No.
Yes.
It's in your options.
Okay. Okay, I can bring some definition of that. I suspect that number is affiliated with either the group or this particular grant, but I can clarify that.
Okay. I would just like to know specifically how these reimbursable items were used in service of this particular investigation before
Well,
approving.
they haven't been purchased yet.
They haven't been purchased yet, but
Yeah.
they need to be purchased by September 30th. That's why we're voting on it now.
Right, because the FBI is the federal government's annual budget starts in October 1st. And so
Yeah.
they're trying to spend down some available money they have, so they make these kind of, if you will buy these things by September 30th, we will reimburse you, and they close out the federal year. I did talk to the chief about this, and, the computer forensic software and training, I mean, that's for like the cell phone. Every time a new version of a cell phone comes out, you have to update your software for that. The tablet computers and laptop computers are for the officers. And the others are used in, criminal investigations. And so this is stuff that they plan to buy, that's eligible expense. They'll get reimbursed by the FBI for those. And beyond that, I don't know if, I don't think there's any ties to the federal, there's any federal obligation to this. It's just they're trying to give us some resources.
But, and these are resources to be used for a specific investigation?
No, they're just, they're not. I'm not, and I'm apologizing, I can't tell you what that is. If you want to suspend this item until the end of the meeting, I'm glad to try to get a hold of the chief and find out.
Yeah, I'd like to move that we do so.
To just hold temporarily for that.
Mr. Mayor, since this is an ordinance.
Thank you,
would like me to
Attorney.
read the heading?
Please do.
Okay. An ordinance to amend the FY 2019-2020 annual operating and capital budget for Athens-Clarke County, Georgia, so as to provide grant funding if awarded from the Department of Justice for the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force Initiative for equipment, supplies, and for other purposes.
Thank you, Attorney Drake. I appreciate it. Commissioner Neesmith, you had a question
No,
or comment?
It's been answered, thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Denson.
Just to clarify, if we're going to move this to the end of it, Manager Williams, can we get maybe clarification also if we are, if we have asked for or if we are using badge cams for officers within this task force? Okay. I know, I'm sorry.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners at this point?
Does my motion need a second, or can we just move this?
It would need a second,
Okay.
Actually, I'm fine moving it to the end of the meeting. I'll just do that into my agenda-setting authority.
Okay.
Manager Williams, just while we're on discussion of this, and this is fresh in everybody's mind, I believe from kind of previous conversation that we have an existing task force collaboration that I believe is with the Oglethorpe County Sheriff's Department.
That's right.
And so this is part of that existing operation.
I'm pretty sure that's the case.
I didn't see it on first glance in the facts and issues, but
Yeah.
but I knew that we had that kind of multi-organizational partnership.
That's my understanding. You know, they have these special names for these task force. I can't imagine we've got multiple drug enforcement task force running around, so.
Okay. We're going to go ahead and move this to the end of the evening and move on with our agenda-setting meeting and return to this after that time. And so pursuant to that, on the agenda-setting session, we have two opportunities for public input. One regarding the consent agenda, those items that have been determined by the agenda review team to be eligible for consent agenda placement, and then new business. Same rules of public input apply as I described earlier. 3 minutes of public input. When the light turns green, you begin speaking. When 30 seconds remain, it turns yellow. And when 3 minutes has concluded, the light turns red. So the consent agenda items are items on the agenda setting session 1 through 7. Would anybody like to speak to any of those items? Items 1 through 7. Would any commissioner like to remove an item from the consent agenda for discussion? Commissioner Wright?
2 and 5, please.
2 and 5. All right, any other? Commissioner Link?
Number 7, please.
Okay. All right. Any other item that a commissioner would like to remove for discussion? All right, so moving forward to public input on old and new business, items 2, 5, 7, and 8 through 21 are up for public input right now. So 2, 5, 7, and 8 through 21. So would any member of the public like to speak to one of those items? All right, it's a quiet group today. All right, not everybody got their coffee at 5 o'clock as I did. So moving on to those items that were removed from consent, Commissioner Wright, you mentioned number 2.
Yes, the only reason I wanted to get number 2 off was just to comment on the superb craftsmanship and the quality that is happening with the group that is installing the sidewalks on Southview Drive right now and the completed part on Baxter. These guys are working long, hard, in the heat, and they are doing a fantastic job. And my neighbors have had nothing but glowing remarks for the whole operation. So I wanted to take that opportunity to share that it's just fantastic.
Thank you for those comments, Commissioner Wright.
And I want it to go back on consent.
Any other comments on 2? Well, we've got that on the table. Everybody's fine with that going back on consent? All right, so Gene, 2 will move back to consent. I'll note, kind of in concert with Commissioner Wright's comments, that the segment on the corner of Baxter and Millage, I think, was done superbly, aesthetically speaking. I know ahead of time, given the tree canopy that was there on that corner, a lot of people had questions about, whether you would really kind of see a reduction in quality there on the corner. But if anything, it looks now like it's always been there. And so kudos to the design and execution team there. Moving on to item number 5, Commissioner Wright, you asked that this be removed as well.
Yeah, as the chair of Legislative Review Committee, the report is just saying that we want to share this fun topic with everybody else in a work session as soon as we possibly can. And it doesn't include what the work of the committee as far as the content, because we weren't at the point to have to discuss it in this format. But if anyone wants to have that, we can disperse it among the mayor and commission, as this is a current event topic. But
I love your generous description of this as a fun topic, Commissioner.
it's
a
an
hoot.
ever-changing.
Just you wait and see. Just wait and see. It's a hoot.
Yeah, it's ever-changing, so it's been a lot of studying, and we're ready to study it with the rest of you guys.
For those members in the room, we're discussing motorized apparatuses, much like the scooters that littered our sidewalks for many months here in town.
And we're trying to get a good, respectful, and responsive company, but there's a lot of details to iron out. And if any other committee members want to comment on it, I wanted, the community to know that we're talking about this, because I've had a lot of people tell me, boy, I'm sure glad we're not going through and don't have any of those. But I don't know if taking it off consent will help the public understand that we are talking about it. And so maybe I'll leave it off consent. I'm not sure
I
if
think
that
that's
helps.
valid, Commissioner Wright. Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I'm grateful for this opportunity for the whole commission to discuss the whole scooter e-bike issue, because I actually used those scooters, although I don't think that they were properly used by many. And I do get calls from constituents about them and questions, and I try and forward them to folks on this committee. So it'll be nice to have that information to the whole commission.
Commissioner Neesmith?
Although I know what the committee's intent is, I don't think this agenda report really spells it out in terms of what is the next step. Is it a work session, or are there actions we're going to vote on?
I've asked that this be moved to a work session. Commissioner Denson?
And so then I'm assuming that we're going to be moving it to a very soon work session, right? Because I believe the moratorium ends, I guess, December 4th. So it's going to be bumped very quickly, I'm guessing. Yeah.
I would hope sooner rather than later. Manager Williams, has this been assigned a date yet?
I'm not sure, I'll have to look. I know we've got a full October calendar, but.
We will get back to you about that.
We'll take November if we need to. But
Yeah, you better prepare to extend.
Any other input on this item?
Yeah, just that.
Commissioner Neesmith?
I think we better be ready to extend the moratorium, because I'm sure there's a process that's going to come out of whatever we approve that will take at least 30, 60, or 90 days to implement if there's an RFP involved and those kinds of things.
So,
Commissioner Wright?
would this be a time that we would want to develop for this agenda cycle, that this topic with the extension of the moratorium?
Yes.
So, certainly at any point, we could make that motion. That could be a commission-defined option upon our voting meeting. That could be included in this, that we extend that moratorium and that we hold a work session. That's certainly likely. I will say I've had some correspondence with the attorney's office. Given that you've got several potential chapters of this novel about different motorized devices, and at least one of those chapters seemed fairly non-controversial, which is the low-speed e-assist bikes. And so I've asked the attorney's office to prepare an ordinance just dealing with those low-speed e-assist bikes. given that I think many members of the commission and certainly some members of staff had had positive experiences with them and seen that as just sort of part of the current landscape of the bicycle world.
Mr. Mayor, if I may add that
Commissioner Neesmith.
the University of Georgia also wants to implement a program for e-assist bikes, and I believe their intent is to hold off until we get this worked out. So that would be an appropriate thing for us to see if we can tackle that first.
Yep.
And
Commissioner
that,
Wright?
I think that fits in with some of the fun that we've been having in committee is the discussion between the e-bike, the 3 different types of them, and if we update the moratorium sooner rather than later and maybe break out the e-bikes from the e-scooters, that would allow the e-bike to pedal on while we
With assistance.
work on, I'm telling you, it's fun. You're missing all the fun. And then, so I guess maybe I'll get with some committee members to work out what that would look like in a commission-defined option when this comes up in October. Does that sound appropriate?
Yes.
And I'll say, as soon as the attorney's office finalizes some language around that,
Okay.
I can float that to commissioners to see if it meets their approval. All right, we're going to leave this off consent, and we're going to move on to item number 7, appointments to the Committee Tree Council. Commissioner Link, you asked that this be removed.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a couple comments, and I'd be happy to put it back on consent. First of all, I'm happy to see this tree council being invigorated and moving towards a full membership. Over the past couple of months in particular, we've had kind of lengthy discussions behind the rail regarding tree issues. I noticed that there's still a couple, 4 positions that will remain vacant. So I just want to put it out to the public. If folks are interested in fulfilling their civic duty in regards to tree policy, those positions are open. I haven't personally seen any calls. How does one put their name forward to be considered to sit on this council? They
can email me.
Okay.
I'm the liaison on the council.
Is there anything
I'd
on
be
our
happy to-
website about, any postings? I'd like to see this advertised a little more broadly, or, it says there's some social media advertising going on out there, but I haven't come across it.
I believe it's either the arborist or the forester who staffs this
Okay.
committee. I apologize, I can't
planning
remember which it is.
department.
Yes.
Yeah, so maybe if we could just see a little,
They can go to AthensTrees.com.
okay. Yeah, if staff could maybe, put a little extra effort into getting the word out about these additional vacancies, because through the years, I've had multiple people ask me about, tree-related issues, and they're folks that I know would be good on a committee like this, but I'm not sure they're even aware. And I'd like to have some kind of social media link that I can get out to some of these neighborhood listservs and social media pages, so folks can, know that opportunity's out there. And with that, I'm happy to see this go back on consent.
Any other comment on this item? All right, we're going to put this back on consent, Gene, and move on to new business. Item number 8 is a proposal to convert 5 part-time animal control shelter positions into 3 full-time positions. The rationale for which is outlined in the agenda report, just around ability to get kind of more permanent folks in these positions and provide greater support for our animal welfare partners. So, Commissioner Harrod.
We move it to consent.
Commissioner Link.
I would love to see it move to consent too, and I just want to thank staff for working with our animal advocates and moving quickly on this issue. It's of utmost importance.
Commissioner Neesmith.
Oh, I'd just like to make a remark that this is part of a plan. This is the first step of a plan that the manager and his staff is implementing to put some better controls and feedback and accountability in our animal services organization. So this is not something that we believe is the do-all, end-all to our shelter issues. This is just the first step, and it's going to provide more support for our volunteer organizations that are helping us out here, and really increase the accountability, the controls, the protocols, all these things. And this is just the first step. So just want you to know that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Denson.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, what Commissioner Neesmith brought up there, that this is just a one step of many. Next week, I'll be hosting a town hall over at the ACC Library on the 25th from 6:30 to 8 o'clock. This entire body, it's going to be open to the public, so you don't have to live in District 5, but where we can actually have staff and talk about some of these changes, but also some of the future changes that we're going to see rolling down the pipe, and also get input from community about other changes they think maybe we should be pursuing. So,
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. All right, everybody find this moving to consent? All right, Gene, number 8 is going to move to consent. Make that note myself on my sheet. Moving on to item number 9, Barnett Shoals Road at Carriage Lane. I think this is at the intersection of Commissioner Wright and Commissioner Harrod's district. Is that correct?
Yeah, where you can safely walk back and forth between our districts.
And now you'll be able to meet in the middle at a protected island. Commissioner Hamby?
I have a question, and I support this, of course, but I do have a question about this, and knowing that a lot of folks along Timothy Road have been waiting on the RFP, RFB for Skyline and Timothy, and I'm assuming that from what I understand, the production company or whoever makes these was behind a bit, and they'll be in a couple of weeks. But I guess I want to make sure that something we voted on several months ago will be put in place before something we vote on next. You see where I'm going?
I do.
Yeah.
And it would be, that has a priority.
Does it? Okay.
We're just moving this decision point forward, and I can clarify where we're at with that process.
Not to be territorial like that, but, you know, people on Timothy want to cross the road safely as well.
You have been assigned to help me with Commission Defined Option on the scooters. So,
Oh, no.
On that note.
She's generous
Thank
tonight.
you for those on Barnett Shoals who understand.
Any other input on this item?
Point out it's in District 2, not District 8.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner Harrod. I appreciate it. A former version of District 8. Any other input on this item?
Just ask if we can put it on consent.
All right, so number 9, moving to consent as well, Gene. All right, item number 10 is,
Mayor, if I might.
Yes.
Just because folks are watching. The staff just let me know that it's going to be 2 weeks for the installation at Skyline Drive.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, and Tim had told me that, so I appreciate that. I just know that, you know, if I saw this and lived on Timothy, I'd be going, what about what's something we've already voted on? So no worries. It's all good.
thanks for that update. I appreciate it, Manager Williams. Thanks, Commissioner Hamby. Item number 10 is the contract for impaired waters monitoring and reporting, extending from October of this year until February 2022. Any input on this item?
Let's put it on
Commissioner
consent.
Neesmith? Move to consent? All right, we are batting 1,000 tonight. Number 10 on consent.
You just jinxed us.
Number 11
too much
is water line upgrades in the kind of Vine and First Street area, Hillside, Oak Ridge, and Booker Street. Any input on this item?
I'm content with this going on consent.
All right, these are in Commissioner Parker's district. Okay, moving this to consent? All right. All right. Number 12 is adoption of the Athens-Clarke County Unified Government's Title VI plan in accordance with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The contours of this are outlined in the agenda report. Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I'm curious to know, what is the procedure through which we assure that we are complying with this plan? What are our kind of checks and balances within our local government to assure that there's compliance?
Sure. And this is a subject I wanted to bring up as well. So back when you adopted the Title VI plan last, you put the internal auditors, the Office of Operational Analysis now, as the person in charge of coordinating that. And the management analyst was also assisting with that. And I let auditor speak on this. She subsequently has asked if that can be transferred to some other person, and I think the most appropriate person would be our new Inclusion and Diversity Officer. So we're going to have to come back to you, because right now we've talked to DOT. we were going to try to be efficient in this agenda item and go ahead and have you transfer to those duties to that position, but that position's not filled. So, you wouldn't have anybody administering it. So they've asked, just do this, get through this, and then when you get the person on board, then come back and amend your plan. So that is the plan at this point.
Do we have any kind of ETA as to when that diversity and inclusion coordinator will be filled?
Yes, I think interviews are being set up right now. And so I would envision, if we have a couple of interviews, that within the next 45 days, we will have named that person, and then whatever time they need to work off, wherever they are.
Okay,
So it's imminent.
okay. I'd like this to remain on the regular agenda. I might have some more questions.
Any other input on this item? Commissioner Harrod?
Apparently, we have a new mayor, Mayor Kelly Kurtz, on page 77 of the PDF. So might want to change that.
Every so often I need relief, so I call him in.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Or her.
Thanks for noting that.
Yeah, it's a woman.
All right, moving on. Item number 13 is the Carriage Lane live stream pipe replacement and also the Barnett Shoals Sidewalk Gap bid and award for two different projects that are being done in conjunction. Any input on this item? All right, and anyone want to move this to consent?
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
All right.
it's my district, sorry, my mind was elsewhere.
All right, perfect. Item 14 concerns a grant opportunity for a new state program that would support Dudley Park improvements that have long been part of a master plan there. Input on this item?
I would say put it on.
Moving to consent?
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Item number 15 is the project concept that we discussed a week ago at our work session regarding a downtown park. And just for members of the public, concept is our earliest stage of project development where we're just thinking kind of from a very high level. We're not putting benches or trees or specific parcels of green space in place. We're just talking, generally speaking, the kind of project that we would see, and then we would move forward into some level of design after this. So, Commissioner Denson?
Yeah, I thought the starting place here with this project concept was good, and it sounded like the commission was behind this, so I would move for this to be put on consent.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I think we had a really good discussion the other night. I know there was some, creative feedback from the commission. And I just want an assurance that there will be, a creative public input process that would allow the public to have, almost like a charrette type process where there will be some, real substantive input from the public on how this project moves forward and what the final product looks like.
Manager Williams, could you talk about either generally speaking, kind of how we move it forward toward design?
Sure.
Or how
And
this specific one would work?
My understanding is that the Downtown Development Authority has engaged a designer. And so we will support them in, whatever processes they would like to. That's exactly why we suggested our normal project delivery process so that there was multiple inputs, for citizen input and y'all's check-in. So we can certainly coordinate with the two directors to try to help them have a robust public input session and have the designer hopefully present to hear some of those comments.
I think I've got Commissioner Wright and then Commissioner Hamby.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, just since we talked about this at the work session, I've been thinking about the water idea element, and I just wanted to say that I really don't think that's going to be a good idea, health and safety wise, because I'm picturing people, the band and electricity and booths and electricity that might be around that area. And then I think at the dark of the night, it might end up being used inappropriately. If you know what I mean?
Well, your one's in the gutter.
Like the biggest urinal in town ever seen. But anyway, I just think that we need to think about how a water feature might inappropriately be used and then be a health hazard.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Hamby?
Sure, thank you. And I'll just piggyback on what Manager Williams has said, that Kelly and I did broach this subject at the last ADD meeting, and the directors are engaging an architect to look at this, and that both the directors heard the comments that we heard last time about some sort of playground equipment or something out there for Russell to play on. And, sorry, Russell, I'm just joking. And
You're
then,
right, you're right.
And then some sort of water feature for Tim to do what Commissioner Denson would do with a water feature. Hopefully not what Commissioner Wright's suggesting. But one possibility, though, Commissioner Wright, is a water, I mean, like was pointed out, it is right near the water department office for now. But one of the things that, and I'm not saying the architect's going to do this, I don't know what the architect would do, but I know this has been thrown out there, is perhaps maybe some sort of water feature along that wall there that kind of a revolving waterfall or something to keep it cool. You see what I'm talking about, but, and there will be, I know the directors talked to the architect about public input sessions, so we'll figure out how that would look so that, but I'm glad this is moving forward, and I think we'll all be pleased with it, and I think the community, more importantly, will be pleased with it, so.
Consent.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I just want to point out that there are plenty of water features out there that don't involve a pool of water that stays full 24/7, and that they can be turned off after hours, so you don't have your drunken college kids cavorting and splish splashing around. There's a good example in Coolidge Park in Chattanooga where they have climbable sculptures that project water onto the flat surface plaza area, and then after 10 o'clock, they're turned off.
Everybody fine moving this to consent? All right, it will be done. All right, Gene 15 is on consent as well. All right, item 16 is simply teeing up the next public hearing regarding prospective movement of Riverbend Parkway into the urban service district for solid waste collection purposes. Commissioner Edwards, do you want to say a word or two about this one?
Sure, I'll just give a couple updates since I have Manager Williams right here. The neighborhood president reached out to me and let me know that it's looking like there's 54 houses, not 63. And that there's a new home that has been built that will kind of update our map in the agenda report at 980 Riverbend Parkway. So we're looking at 54 houses, 63 lots. And we'll work together on that as we move forward. So,
Yes, sir.
yeah. Thanks.
Thanks for the update, Commissioner Edwards. Any other input on this item? Commissioner Wright?
The current service that people outside of government service, do they have roll cart size options?
Yes.
So this is an indicator that equals what they're having now, we're presuming is what they would be requesting.
That's right, Commissioner. That tiered pricing ordinance requirement covers both our own services as well as the private services.
Thank you.
Any other input on this item? All right, this has to have a public hearing by ordinance, so this is going to remain on the active agenda. Item number 17, moving on, concerns a funding mechanism for a previously approved plan development at 250 Dublin Street. It's in Commissioner Parker's district.
Thank you, Mayor Gertz. I think in many ways we have a big win here. When we approved this rezone back in February, thought we were getting 3 to 4 units of affordable housing and 9 at market rate, hopefully below the, or affordable for Athens for the rest of the units in this cottage court. With this reallocation of funding here to help support the Athens Land Trust, we would actually get 13 units, which is a pretty awesome deal. I anticipate this to be a highly contentious issue, however, as a lot of folks who live in this area have been very adamant that they would like to see the local government diversify its toolbox of affordable housing mechanisms and the way it resources various community organizations in undertaking affordable housing work. And so I'd like to see this remain off the consent agenda.
Thanks, Commissioner Parker. Any other input on this item? Commissioner Link?
So, yeah, I'm just kind of curious how this came about, because originally it was kind of private project that, that was allowing, or was kind of gifting, I guess, some of the land to the land trust, and now it's becoming a fully public / nonprofit project. And it sounds like we're looking at funds from two different sources, CBDG funds as well as SPLOST funds, the SPLOST funds to help cover the infrastructure, the sewer and water and stormwater stuff. I mean, I guess this is probably just a question for behind the scenes, because this is the first I'm hearing about it, and it's great that, it's morphing from 3 units to 13 affordable units. I'm fully supportive of that, and I'm fully supportive of the land trust model for affordable housing. I truly believe that it is the only way to assure affordable housing in perpetuity, affordable homeownership into perpetuity. But yeah, I probably have some questions.
My understanding, Commissioner, is that the original developer didn't have the capacity to do the work, and so put the parcel up for sale. And for folks listening, when a plan development has been approved by the commission, that plan development stays with the land regardless of ownership. And so where the streets are, the number of homes, where the shrubbery has to be, the things that were approved by this body earlier this year would remain true. And the only difference would be that, as Commissioner Parker outlined, you'd have 13 fully affordable units rather than a small margin.
So the land trust was able to purchase this property outright?
They have a bid in on the property.
Okay.
Commissioner Denson?
Thank you, Mayor. So on that, with the understanding of that's how the plan development works, and it can be transferred even if the owner is transferred. So our agreement that we had with them to have, how many affordable units was it originally?
Three or four.
Is that, when we get those agreements, is that part of the plan development? Is that therefore, because what I worry about is that what happened here, and I think this way we ended up benefiting even greater later, moving on. But what I worry about is that we get these promises from these developers that we agree to other things, they're gonna have these things, and then they get sold. And I just want to make sure that, that we actually have some leverage in that situation. It seems like we can get in some sticky situations where we actually have worse situations happening. Thankfully, that didn't happen here or so far, but.
I know Commissioner Parker's got a comment, but I would say broadly, part of the challenge with the environment we've been in terms of our ordinance is that we've not had a standard mechanism for participation between private entities and affordable housing providers. And that's part of what the Planning Commission and thus the Planning Department has been tasked with, is kind of coming up with that consistent mechanism so that we don't find ourselves, wondering if we're only holding on to promises, but instead that we've got some sort of permanent method of ensuring that continued affordability through approval of plan developments or rezonings. Commissioner Parker?
Yeah, I just wanted to further clarify. We had a memorandum of understanding. There was a memorandum of understanding between the developer and the Athens Land Trust that they would sell some of the lots to them. But in that instance, we don't have assurance that that will actually hold true in the long run. And so this opportunity presents us with a chance to actually assure that those lots will be affordable, whereas in the previous plan, we were kind of just working off of a promise.
Right, and I guess that is my concern there, and I'm glad to hear that, and that's part of the thing that we're looking at, because a memorandum of understanding with a developer, and that developer sells it to a different developer, that MOU is no longer valid, I would assume. So, yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to suggest that Mr. Griffin come to the voting meeting on this and explain a little bit about what the PD does and doesn't do in terms of holding to particularly land trust properties that were indicated in the PD, because it's unclear in my mind, too, as to whether the PD can specify that the land trust gets that property.
It doesn't.
I don't think it does.
Yeah.
So, I think they let us know that's what they intended to do, but it wasn't part of the plan development.
Manager Williams, can we get some correspondence from Planning Director Brad Griffin just to clarify this question?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item number 18, very exciting downtown project, the Athens Music Walk of Fame Public Art Project concept. And so this would be bounded by Pulaski, Clayton, I think College, or maybe Lumpkin, and Broad Street. So, so kind of a big art walk area in which is contained the Georgia Theater, the Morton Theater, and the 40 Watt Club. Any input on this item? Commissioner Link?
I'm excited about this item, and I'm excited for some opportunities for some more public art, especially music-related public art, and some injection of history, our music history. So I would be happy to see this go on consent.
Commissioner Denson?
I guess I have a question is, I would be, if the managers have an answer to this, I'll be very impressed. But looking at this and just seeing what other cities have done with their crosswalks, I see that, since this crosses a couple of streets here on Hull Street, I wonder if our policies allow us to have some creative uses of crosswalks within this, or if there's wiggle room within what we can do there. Because that'd be really cool to see just that continue on, as we've seen Atlanta do cool sidewalks to the Rainbows and other places too.
Well, I'm sorry I can't impress you tonight. But give me another opportunity.
Something's never changed.
What I don't know is if there is any, because I've seen the other ones too in other cities, and I don't know if GDOT has an issue with that, or if there's some previous iteration of a policy that did or didn't prevent that. I'd have to research that, but I will.
Okay, that'd be great, because if we have that opportunity, I think that could just make this project even cooler and give an extra piece for the artist to work with, so.
I think Atlanta has some.
They do, yeah.
So,
Do they?
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Any other input on this item, creative crosswalk or otherwise? Folks fine moving this to consent? All right, Gene, 18 moves to consent. All right, item number 19 is in addition to the Office of Operational Analysis Audit Work Plan. Any input on this item? Commissioner Link?
Yeah, so last year, the audit committee voted to move forward with recommending an audit of animal control as well as an audit of our grant management program. And this was in the kind of transition between a new commission and old commission. Months went by when there was no meeting called. And so that work plan was put on hold to allow the auditor to go ahead and complete the Sheriff's Department audit and make headway on the other ones that were on our previous work plan. So at our audit committee meeting last week, we decided, now that the Sheriff's Department audit is done, which was humongous and was certainly much more work than I think was anticipated, we decided to vote to go ahead and authorize to ask this body to authorize the Office of Operational Analysis to move forward with that animal control audit. The other audits that were on that previous work plan are wrapping up in the next couple months, and they can go ahead and get started on this and hopefully make short work of it, and we can get to the bottom of some of the questions that have been plaguing our community recently. So.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Neesmith?
I support this, but my only hesitation is that animal control is going to be a moving target with the changes that the manager's working on, which have to do with procedures and tools and staffing and relationships with third parties. So I am concerned about that fact, that she would be auditing a moving target.
I think, a big concern is getting to the bottom of exactly what went wrong this past summer and the summer before to help inform those changes moving forward.
I think that's what's going to happen with the plan that the manager's putting in place and already begun with the meetings with our volunteer organizations. Because that's the kind of feedback that he's getting already and will continue to give, which will be then become implementation recommendations. And so I think that if we audit the way it is now, we're wasting our time, because that's not the way it's going to be tomorrow, literally.
No, I've got input from Commissioner Thornton and And from Commissioner Edwards, I certainly have conceptualized this as the prospect of being able to have a pre and post analysis, and perhaps, in fact, identify where gains have been made, kind of given some of the new contours that Commissioner Neesmith, I think, describes. Commissioner Thornton.
I totally disagree with Jerry about a moving target. We are trying to look to see what the problem was that will actually help our manager as he rolls out his plan. It would be a waste of time to roll out a plan and not look at where the problems were. And this goes beyond, this is no criticism of the manager's recommendations at all. I'm so glad they're on the table. But this did not just happen last month. This has been going on over a year. And this community is very concerned about that. So I think the audit helps what the manager's office is trying to do. I hope that there is, between the audit and the manager's office, I hope that there is a community group that is working with the manager. So I think the audit actually helps what the manager is doing. He should be working not just with his staff, but he needs to work with the community and the volunteers. The volunteers know, the staff knows, so this is an extra tool, in my opinion, for the manager's effort to make some changes. It's value added to the work that's already going to be done.
And I'm grateful that that I can report that there's been a great deal of interaction with the animal welfare community and kind of the many volunteer bodies that exist out there in City Hall. So I think things are moving in the right direction. Commissioner Edwards and then Commissioner Neesmith.
Well, that's what I was just going to point out. I mean, already those volunteer groups are a part of the manager's process. So it's not something he's going to do. It's something that he is doing. And I believe that we'll see that it actually becomes an integral part of the operation, their involvement and their feedback. And that's not a reason not to do the audit, but I'm just saying, just reassuring everybody, that's already happening. The animal welfare organizations are involved in defining the process, identifying the problems, and identifying the controls and the accountability.
Commissioner Denson.
And I might have missed it on here, but I guess to Commissioner Link or the auditor, is there a timeline of when this specific audit would happen?
We're looking to wrap up the last two audits that we're doing right now at the end of October at the very latest. And so we can do pre-planning starting October 1st and look to start interviews shortly thereafter, beginning of November.
Okay.
We have two audits that are on the table. One is in draft mode. It's being proofed right now, and we anticipate that being completed in the next week, and we'll turn that over to the department and the manager's office. And we just started the last audit last week, the interviews, or 2 weeks ago, and we anticipate that lasting about 6 weeks.
Okay. I mean, that makes me feel a bit, because I understand where Commissioner Neesmith is coming, because I think that we've been telling staff that we want to see changes quickly, but then so at the same time, we don't want to have to wait a year for an audit to finish before we can do those changes. But if we're able to get started that quickly, it seems like it would be kind of happening at the same time that we're implementing these changes, which I agree with Commissioner Thornton could be very helpful. So,
Commissioner
Well,
Neesmith.
at the risk of throwing the manager into the fight, which isn't really a fight, this is a very healthy discussion. Blaine, when do you think the audit, do you have any feeling for when the appropriate time for an audit to begin would be in your process?
Well, I mean, so you alluded, we had a productive meeting today with some of our major stakeholders. We have created a process for planning, for reviewing our policies and protocols, for understanding which ones they think take priority. They've already thrown some ideas on the table about what they'd like to see. We're going to do a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threat analysis with all of them, as well as with the staff. We're going to bring those back together. and come up with some goals and some specific actions that need to be taken. Those will have resources assigned to them, and we'll understand going into the budget year which ones we want to pursue. We're going to, with our partners, develop key indicators and data to be transparent about what's going on with the euthanasia, with the cleanings, with the vaccinations. We hope to get this new software system that apparently our partners use and hold in high regard. That will help us with our accountability pieces. So all of that will be happening here in the near future. You know, I guess it depends on what the purpose of the audit is. If it's to evaluate, you know, the changes, then you may want to delay. If it's to investigate the past, then that really doesn't matter.
So let me follow up with one more question. You think it would be possible for the auditor to audit the way it is now in light of the changes going on? I mean, if we want to establish a before and after picture, ideally we would do an audit, and I don't know how you do this, of the way it is now while it's changing, and then evaluate the changes with that input. That seems very cumbersome to me.
I just have to defer to y'all.
Commissioner, just to kind of weigh in briefly on that question, I would anticipate that at the least you've got some numeric metrics around number of animals, kind of movement of those animals through the system, and so you could sort of take a, say calendar year 2018 snapshot, and then potentially, concluding months of 2019, early 2020 snapshot.
Yeah, so perhaps the audit would be a snapshot of metrics as opposed to organization. And then after we get the organization in place and the procedures and processes, we take a snapshot of the metrics again a year from now to see, or whatever the appropriate time is, to see the effect a year after implementation. I think that would be a very good audit. But of course, we really shouldn't need an audit for that. We should be able to get those numbers anytime we want them if these procedures and processes work. We don't need an audit to do that.
Commissioner Thornton and then Commissioner Link.
I would again like to express the importance of the audit. The more pushback that I'm hearing, the more I'm concerned now an audit really needs to happen. It's not no big deal. We had some problems. The audit will help Blaine as he moves forward. Whether you want to do it metrics or whatever, or you want to give our auditor some direction or guidance, come to the audit committee meeting and make a suggestion on how you want it to go. We are not in the business no, Blaine said it very well. We're talking about transparency. And we have lost a lot of trust in this community. And this is just a small step of rebuilding that trust again. It's no big deal. We know we've had some problems, and we're fixing them. I would think that the manager's office would be happy to have an audit that will align with the goals and objectives they are aiming for. So again, if there's something out, and I say this all the time, if there's something out there bubbling, just put it out on the table. Other than that, let's be as transparent as we can whenever we can.
Commissioner Link.
Yeah, I will say that one of the reasons that the audit committee was not reluctant to put on hold that work plan that included the audit of the animal control for this past year was because in light of the incidents last summer at Animal Control, we were assured that changes were put in place and it wasn't going to happen again. What's to say that in light of the issues that happened this past summer, it's not going to happen again? This is an insurance. And I truly believe that, an outside objective audit of this facility can help bring some more issues to light that the manager can find very useful. And we did expand the scope to consider budgetary concerns. So, I think that some recommendations and suggestions can come out of this audit to assure that this facility is properly budgeted, properly staffed, the proper policies are in place, and then that the full story is being told. The auditor will have the authority to speak with some of these volunteers who have witnessed some of these things firsthand, and speak with past employees. So, I feel very strongly that this needs to happen, and I feel very strongly that it will bring forward some useful information that will assure that we have a proper facility up and running that does justice to the lives that it takes care of.
It's not on consent.
Thanks for that note of clarification, Commissioner Wright. I appreciate
We'll
that.
think about it some more.
We've been on a roll, but I think this one will stay.
All right, any other substantive input on this item?
I just think maybe we can probably work out a process where the auditor provides us with a report, and it's very clear about what's been fixed, or what actions are in process for what was broken, or where the problems were. What I don't want us to see is an audit report of the way it used to be, because that's really not of any use. And it would be very useful if we know what got fixed, or what's going to be fixed, and what needs to be fixed that hasn't been addressed. So perhaps we can work out a real meaningful audit that really
What makes
captures.
you think this is not meaningful? You keep saying that word.
Well, I want to hear out Commissioner Neesmith, then I'll recognize you, Commissioner.
Well, I'll just answer that. Looking at the way something was that's been fixed doesn't really give you any information.
Commissioner Edwards?
I made this motion to execute this audit over animal control, and I made it because I have come to recognize the benefits that this community has enjoyed post the sheriff's audit. And I was talking to the sheriff today on the phone and complimented him on the new hiring video that I saw at Carmike the other night. And that was an idea that the auditor's office promoted and brought forward by showing an example from another community in Hall County. They had a great hiring video, and the sheriff learned about that through this audit process and created a great video. So I think the audit office did a great job with the sheriff's audit, and sort of through that process looked outside the community at the way other institutions are handling the sheriff's office. And the sheriff learned a lot and executed. So thinking conceptually how this animal control might work, I imagine the auditor's going to be looking outside of Athens-Clarke County as well, just like the last audit, and learning best practices in other communities and bringing those ideas to the committee and encouraging us to encourage the adoption of some of these best practices. So
That would be constructive.
yeah, I think it'll be great.
And I'm just going to piggyback. You're right, because I don't even know where I was at, but I saw this brochure for the sheriff's department and hiring. That came out of the audit. So we're not just trying to patch something up. We're trying to be proactive and bigger. And I think all the help we get, the audit should not be, and I've talked it over with Ms. Maddox, the audit is not all about what's wrong. It's about good things too, or how do we highlight it, or how do, it's not a punishment. It's not like the IRS is coming to check on your, audit your taxes, but I think it's a positive step. I think we should get in the habit of auditing. We got a list of departments that had audits and the ones that didn't. And there were a lot of departments that did not have audits. This should start being common practice, not just because something is wrong. We should be looking at everything all the time and staying ahead of the curve. So it's not trying to dismiss or discount what the manager's office has already started. It should enhance, it should be value added to the work.
And that was not my argument. That's not what I said.
That's what I said.
All right. Any other input on this item? All right. Item number 20 is an MOU or memorandum of understanding pursuant to the previously approved facility expansion plan for the Classic Center that involves public-private partnership and prospectively, in addition, the child care facility on that same footprint. And some pre-engineering is contemplated to entertain just the viability of the site and do some of that preliminary environmental work. Commissioner?
Yes, since it was title only in its publication on Friday, I'm just getting a chance to read a little bit of it. Can we make sure it gets up on the website so that it can be read as soon as possible?
Absolutely. We can make sure that's on the site tomorrow. Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I haven't had an opportunity to read it either, and it's kind of news to me. I mean, this is a very complex project we're looking at, and, quite frankly, the SPLOST list hasn't even passed yet. So I would suggest that the Downtown Master Plan Committee be reinvigorated so we can kind of vet these kind of things along the way. There's things in this vision that may or may not congeal with the Downtown Master Plan, and we may or may not be comfortable with that. So I really feel like something like this needs that separate committee. I know the Classic Center Authority weighs in on these things, but I really feel like there needs to be a committee of elected officials that is kind of more intimately schooled in this project as it moves along. So I would ask, Commissioner Edwards that maybe we reinvigorate that committee so we can keep close tabs on this as we move along.
Commissioner Denson?
Yeah, I guess since this is just got put before us, I know we discussed it in loose terms, but I wonder if the attorney could maybe hit us with the highlights, a synopsis of what this is doing here.
I'll be glad to.
Thanks.
Well, the memorandum of understanding is for the development of the Hickory Street parking deck, which is contemplated as part of the SPLOST 220 project number 3. That project is for the Classic Center Arena, which provides for, if it's approved in a referendum by the voters, funding for the design and construction of a new public assembly facility arena space and related areas to accommodate a permanent seating capacity of approximately 5,500. Also, the other element of the Classic Center Arena project was that it was further anticipated to foster and support related economic development. And near the Classic Center Arena, that may include but not be limited to a hotel, a senior living residential development, associated parking development, and other associated support areas to adequately support the functions of the Classic Center facility. And as part of that related economic development near the arena, this agreement would be for purposes of providing for the development and operation of the project, which is a parking deck of approximately 1,000 to 1,500 new parking spaces, which may include but not be limited to approximately 300 to 400 spaces for the developer, 300 to 400 spaces for the Classic Center Arena, 300 to 400 parking spaces for separate corporate facilities, separate corporate entities, and then 300 to 400 parking spaces for future needs of the unified government. And also ground level retail space, including an on-site child care facility. This public-private partnership agreement is just the first step. It's an MOU. The MOU says it's non-binding. To Commissioner Link's concern, it provides in subsection A that under the direction of the county manager, a negotiation team will be created to negotiate with the developer and the Classic Center Authority a mutually acceptable lease or ground lease between the unified government and the Classic Center Authority of 50 years, encompassing a minimum of such portions of the project that will include the parking spaces allocated to the developer and to the Classic Center Authority. There will also be a development agreement and other related agreements which will provide for the property declaration, the property owners association documents, with the intention for these to be completed by December 31st, 2019. I would point out that this process would be very similar to what went on with the Washington Street parking deck project, where the project was condominiumized, with ownership of the public elements of the parking deck being owned by the unified government and/or the Classic Center Authority, and then the developer portions being owned by, obviously, the developer. So there's, the agreement goes on to provide that the negotiation team, of which the county manager will be the lead, will come back to the commission to approve certain parameters of the project, concept sufficient enough to allow the input of the commission. The parties acknowledge and agree that the schedule and related milestone dates and approval by the mayor and commission noted above are subject to change, because we understand this is just the very beginning, and it says that and that change is also understood that input and direction of the mayor and commission that changes in either the design of the project or the development agreement may be required. So this is the first step. One of the primary purposes of this agreement is to allow for the performance of the subsurface. This is the one thing the agreement definitely does now. It allows for the performance of the subsurface exploration and geotechnical engineering evaluation necessary to begin the preliminary planning of the project. One of the critical aspects of whether this project of the extent of this project is going to be ensuring that the proposed site for the parking deck is appropriate from an engineering standpoint. It's understood that there may be, in the past, there's been rock located there, so the cost of building the facility, and also this location is critical to the stormwater infrastructure of downtown. Water flows down that way. So I think the main thing I would say this agreement does is it allows that work to be performed by Geohydro Engineers Incorporated. And that is a proposal that the Classic Center Authority was able to get, and it would provide us to be able to do that preliminary work so we could determine whether the project is feasible. So it's a very fluid agreement. I think it's an agreement that it is an agreement that does not bind this commission other than to do that original work. And I think it tried to account for making sure there was oversight as far as design and public and managed by the county manager from a negotiation team standpoint. And that's basically, in essence, what the agreement does.
Commissioner Link?
So in a nutshell, the purpose is to free up this public land to allow this hydro engineering company to go in and do the due diligence to the preliminary work towards the construction of a parking deck, which is essentially phase one of the overall Classic Center Arena project, which hasn't even been voted on by the public. So I'm curious, if the public hasn't even approved this project list, the money certainly hasn't been collected yet, where is the money coming from to do this preliminary work?
The money is coming, the agreement provides that the money is going to come a third from the unified government, a third from the Classic Center Authority, and a third from the developer.
So there will come a time when this body would be voting on that contract with that engineering company?
No, this contract will be done through the Classic Center Authority,
Okay.
which they all have the authority to do.
And so do we have the name of the private developer?
We do. It's in the agreement. It's the agreement, member of understanding for the development of the Hickory Street parking deck among the unified government of Athens-Clarke County, the Classic Center Authority, and the Mark at Athens 2 LLC, an affiliate of Landmark Properties, Inc.
But
So-
there are no terms set as to what Landmark Properties will be offering up to the local government in exchange for this use of public property. Has that been negotiated, and does this body
So
have
they
any
will
say in
pay.
that?
Those terms have not been negotiated yet. That is part of the development agreement that will come back to this body for approval. Similar to the Washington Street parking deck, the developer would pay a negotiated agreed lease amount for the long-term land lease.
Mr. Turner, this MOU is to begin that process.
This is again that process.
Of defining that agreement.
It
I
has
mean,
to-
I mean, this is complex, and this is the first time I'm laying eyes on it, and that's why I really wish we had a process in place by which, some representation of this body could go through these things before we end up behind the rail discussing them.
Commissioner Denson.
I mean, to my understanding, so yeah, I understand like that this allows us to begin the negotiation, if I'm getting this correct, with absolutely no terms nailed down at all at that place. This the beginning of the negotiation. So we're not promising the ability for anybody to develop anything at this time. The only thing that we're guaranteeing here, if I get this right, is to do the subsurface exploration and geotechnical engineering evaluation of the land. That's the only thing that we're
That is correct.
absolutely giving the rights over to do at this
Yeah,
time.
if you look in the last subsection 4, it says, "This MOU expresses only the intent of the parties, and notwithstanding anything here to the contrary, shall not be deemed a legally binding agreement. This MOU is not intended to create nor shall create any obligation on the part of the parties concerning the proposed lease, development, or operation of the project, and except for this paragraph, shall only serve as a basis for the further discussion and negotiations and for the preparation and submission of development agreements for further review and approval by the parties," of which this mayor and commission is one of the parties.
Okay, so this is not going to allow anybody to do any kind of development or even any changes to that land, that property at all?
No.
It just allows them to evaluate this, and then it is allowing the manager's office and our negotiation team to just begin negotiations?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And,
Just wanna
and also, I want to, in the spirit of full disclosure, subsection E, paragraph, section 3, says that in the event of the referendum's approval of the 2020 SPLOST, the Athens-Clarke County Unified Government and the Class Center Authority acknowledge and agree that any costs or expenses that are incurred by either entity related to this project may be reimbursed from the SPLOST funds budgeted for the Class Center Arena project, which will be an appropriate expenditure.
All righty.
Any other further input on this item? All right, moving on, just a quick note that item number 21 is a proclamation noting National Mental Health Awareness Week. This government, of course, has been very engaged in behavioral health supports, and the week of October 6th through 12th is Mental Health Awareness Week, and so there's just a proclamation acknowledging that that'll be on our October agenda.
And there will be a rally. I think it's on the 6th.
I don't have that date on my calendar, I apologize.
Yeah, anyway, we'll let you know, but there will be a Mental Health Awareness Week rally on the courthouse steps that I hope some of you can attend.
All right, so given that, returning to our earlier special called session item, the reimbursement of investigative expenses for the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force, I think Manager Williams has answers to some of the questions that we had earlier.
Sure. And I just want to say, too, that I know it's important to ask questions so that citizens know and understand, but, some of these, if you could give them to me in advance, I could be prepared and I could share them with you. The item number, Commissioner Parker, is just an federal internal control number associated with the reimbursement. It is not a case. It is not an investigation.
So these funds are just used generally?
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct. As far as badge cams, I think is the term you used.
Or body cams, yeah.
Or body, okay, because we looked into badge cams, that's slightly different, but with body cams, and not to really get into, I will say that search warrant being delivered and high-risk arrest, our SWAT team wears body cameras. When you have an undercover officer, the chief says that could blow their cover and jeopardize their safety, and so that, we can talk more about police operations, but that's the first. And this agenda item really doesn't, other than, it's for the equipment for the task force, it doesn't really involve that.
And I understand that. It's just, to me, it's this is a continuing of agreement to interact and be a part of this. And like I said, my big concerns come, in which I'll send out information to the entire commission so they can see this, but the fact, like I said, the city of Atlanta decided, and I understand that the undercover, and that was kind of covered by the request also, that they understood that was undercover by other agents on the part of the task force, They requested, and I guess the big problem was that the City of Atlanta officers wanted to, as we require our officers to, so they wanted to have that be consistent among all their officers in all operations, which I think would be a good thing for us to be doing too. And when that was denied, I think that was a bit of a red flag for the City of Atlanta, and I'll say it's a bit of a red flag for me. So I would like us to at least look into that further to see what we can possibly do. And I definitely have concerns if the response back to that is the same that Atlanta got, which is body cams are barred from these task force.
Commissioner Link?
Isn't there a possibility of redacting the video, like blurring faces to protect undercover officers, much like, the CIA would redact names in a intelligence report?
If you're wearing a body cam and you're undercover,
We
you got a
can,
problem.
we can, well,
But I
that's,
mean, it
I
would
think
catch
it's,
other undercover officers in the video. That I
we
think
can have
that's-
discussion, well, there's that too, on police operations.
If you're an undercover officer and you get patted down and you have a camera, your cover is blown and the consequences could be quite significant.
Again, I'm not speaking for the undercover officers, I'm speaking for the other officers on the task force, just to clarify.
Okay.
Any other questions regarding this item?
Just a comment, I mean, this interagency drug task force, as we know, there are drugs in Athens, and as we know, those drugs come from other counties. And so without an interagency task force, our hands are tied when it comes to doing really serious drug investigations in our region. And that affects us.
Commissioner Parker?
I'm still up in the air about why and whether these expenditures are necessary. And I feel like this is the kind of thing that could come before our Citizens Review Board to have them flesh through the details of this to determine whether or not this is actually in the best interest of the safety of our community. And given that, I don't feel comfortable supporting this right now.
Well, in effect, it's a grant from the federal government to buy equipment for our police. That's what it's for, and the task force is operating as it always has, but you don't have to accept the reimbursement.
I'd entertain a motion at this point.
We have a motion and a second on the floor.
And I apologize, was that a motion from Commissioner
I think I made the motion.
Wright and Harrod? I apologize.
It's been a while.
Okay. Commissioner Link?
What is the motion?
I just want to say that
Accept the grant?
For movement of the grant?
Okay.
I do know that our drug task force is stretched very thin. I know from experience. I've asked them for help in my own neighborhood. I tend to be supportive of this, but I would ask some of those questions to be answered. And I know we are moving forward with a citizens review board or some kind of, citizens oversight committee. So I would hope that they could be tasked with looking more into this program and how, optimum transparency can be achieved with safety for our officers and fairness for the whole community.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Call roll.
Wright?
Yes.
Dennison?
Abstain.
Neesmith?
Yes.
Edwards?
Yes.
Harrod?
Yes.
Thornton?
Yes.
Hamby?
Yes.
Parker?
No.
Link?
Yes.
Okay. 1 no, 1 abstention, and 2 yes. I'm sorry, 7 yes.
All right. Motion's approved. I would entertain a motion to enter into executive session for discussion of real estate and personnel.
Second.
All right. All in favor? Aye. All right. Everybody, thank you for joining us this evening. We are now to move into executive session for these items.